I have to admit, a little bit nervous because since the morning, these are some of my childhood superheroes that I'm sitting with, Rinpoche Ji and Helena and Claude. A lot of people when I was growing up, I really looked up to be on this panel together with them, and spend the day is really a little bit overwhelming and very exciting. And let me just start by introducing the people we have today. We have Claude Alvares. He's like the grandfather of many different movements for us. And he's from Goa, involved with many different things from alternative farming and multiversity and anti-mining and so many amazing things that it seems like he's getting younger as the days go on, though the white hairs are growing. But he's one of my real deep inspirations. The next person on the panel is Felix Padel, who's a very dear friend from Orissa. Spent a long time in Orissa and with learning from tribal communities, and very much one of the persons involved in Niyamgiri, if everyone knows about that. And he's a fantastic violinist. So I think, yeah, you brought your violin? Yes. So around the day, when the lunchtime, maybe you'll hear him playing some music for us. Then we have Aseem Srivastava from Delhi, and very well-known economist. Then we have our friend Camila, who's from Brazil. Very strong movement leader and activist in Brazil, and beautiful as well as super smart and fiery, so I'm very happy to have her with us here. And a very dear friend of mine, Charles Eisenstein. We keep talking about what he really does, I'm not sure, but he wrote a fantastic book, Sacred Economics. And and he's from the United States. So I'm really happy to have all of you here. The word, the whole economics of happiness. So the thing that attracted me instantly was the word happiness. And then I looked at this other word, economics, and I remembered all of my economics classes, and my eyes started rolling and things. And I was like, why are we talking about economics? So maybe I'd like to start off with the panels. Why do we need to talk about economics, and what do we need to talk about specifically in economics? I remember all those graphs we did, and I hope none of you economists that are sitting up here are going to start boring us with all these graphs and things. But what do we really need to talk about in economics?
One of the classical economists who's not read anymore, but who I think is still relevant, somebody called David Ricardo. He used to call it the dismal science. And the reason why it used to be called the dismal science is because you can't have it all. In other words, scarcity is a fact of life. And I think that that is probably the biggest illusion that economists have, and that economists have spread by believing it themselves. And the reason I say that is that actually, if we have a sense of needs, and if we build an economy around needs, then actually abundance is the fact of life. Abundance is what nature is all about. There's a poem which some of you might know. I'm just going to paraphrase it here. It's from one of our medieval great poets, Rahim. And he says, the tree does not yield fruit for itself. The pond does not have water in order to drink it itself, and so on. So nature is actually, of its very nature, of its very essence, a giving element, a giving thing, if you will. But to produce scarcity out of the fact of abundance has actually been the achievement of some intellectual geniuses from the economics profession, with some noble exceptions. So I think that there's a reason today why we should talk about the economics of happiness in order to create an abundance of it, And the way we create an abundance of happiness in a world like the kind that Helena just described, which is mad, which is addicted, which has to be de-addicted from oil, from money, from various interesting things like that. In such a world, I think we need to really understand the possibilities that nature actually makes available. And when I say nature, I include ourselves right in the midst of it. I think we have very much nature right here in this auditorium. We are not separate. It's again an illusion created by a highly processed environment which makes us think that nature is out there and we are here. Anybody who breathes is already nature. So there's a whole machinery of illusions which we have to dismantle. And I think that that process has already been going on, and this conference is, I think, a big step in the right direction. Now over to Claude to destroy everything I said.
You've been a very wise man this morning compared to economists generally. But just to respond to what you have said, and basically to say something beyond what you have said, why do we think about only, when we think about economics, we think about production and goods and services. Now, we have Professor Rinpoche who spoke to us this morning, who is an exemplar of Buddhism, which actually doesn't talk about happiness. It's basically the Eightfold Path and how to get out of the circle of misery. And that is a separate economics, Buddhist economics, which really doesn't figure in any of the discussions, conventional discussions of economics that we have in our societies, our academic institutions and so on. And similarly with a lot of other things which really have no relationship to goods or production of goods. And it indicates how much the modern mind has been conditioned that we think only in terms of goods, productions, economies, and all those sort of things. But we really don't think about that part of our life which really has nothing to do with these things. Which is what you said, you talked about the abundance of nature. I'm talking about the abundance of what's within.
That's nature.
This guy is a good academic. You see, I'm talking about, for example, our archetypical guys who are people who really, in the end, own nothing. If you take my favorite heroes, they are Jain Munis. I've gone very often for these Diksha ceremonies because of my friendship with Maharaj, Guru Maharaj, who was a young diamond merchant who became a monk a couple of years ago. And he periodically keeps inviting me for these things. And the most powerful event today, if you ever want to really go and see one, is not to come to Goa to participate in sunburn, but it's basically, if you can go and see a Diksha ceremony anywhere in Gujarat when it takes place. And the most awesome thing that can move you, because a part of the Diksha ceremony is this procession where the person who is becoming a monk actually has to distribute his patrimony or his heritage or whatever is owed to him among all the people along the roadside, and including the patrimony which is kept for him, which cannot be distributed to the other members of the family. It has to literally be thrown to people. And you have this phenomenon of a guy who's, or sometimes it's women also, young girls also I've seen taking Diksha. They are moving in this procession and they're throwing everything. They're throwing the rupee notes, they're throwing silver, they're throwing cups, they're throwing all sorts of things to the public. And the public is there in a mad scramble trying to pick up all those 10 rupee notes and so on. It's like that elephant thing. If you're watching from outside, you say, wow, here is one person liberating himself and a million other getting bonded. But that's economics. That's not economics. That's the way the world today is structured. And unfortunately, I thought part of this conference of economics, the economics of happiness, is to try and get people to really don't look at formal economies. They are a piece of bullshit. They are basically a gigantic effort to destroy the planet. And we know it, we can see it in front of our eyes daily, on a daily basis. And we've got to, somehow or the other, I'm one of those who believe in, I'm a Luddite of the old school who still believes in crashing things, not people, but things. The things that we create, the structures that we create, mental structures, conditioning, and all those sorts of things, just to get out, just to jump out of windows, to just go out. Because sometimes you feel that you are in a cage. And I was coming into Bangalore city yesterday morning with my colleagues. I said, this city which I used to live in 25 years ago, which was a garden city, today looks like a slave camp. Nobody was smiling anymore. Everybody was traveling from this side to that side, this side to that side. Half of them were stuck in a car. And nobody knows what they're doing. But they're all really dedicated to their slavery. Including 4 hours of sitting in a metal car, in a box, and not having anything to do. So these are the absurdities of modern economics. And when I meet an economist, I just turn off. Actually, because I don't understand anything about economics. But I think that economists have really made human beings, intelligent human beings, into the laughing stock of the planet.
In a sense, if you look at, I think one reason why we need to tangle with economics is because a lot of the prime ministers of this country, most countries, are trained in economics, as if that's the best. And he's not alone. I mean, most, probably Obama, they are all very, very expert, very, very fine economists. But the trouble is, economics, as you've both been saying, is so far removed from reality. And one of my themes at the moment is how economy and ecology, they mean almost the same thing. They mean basically the laws or the logic of correct housekeeping. And actually, among the few communities that have really, are really living ecologically in a proper sense, sustainably, are the indigenous communities, whether of Ladakh or Central India. And it's getting very, very hard for them to do that. And in fact, most people often just talk about tribal people, Adivasis, they're very primitive or something. But they're incredibly highly developed in the art of sustainability, in the art of restraint in what they take from nature. And that is economics. Actually, when Aristotle used the word economia, he also used another word, chrimistiki, which is the creating of wealth, which he said is not a very good activity. But that's what economists are basically concentrated on, creating wealth. And economia, of how to create balance with what we have. This is, there are so many economic systems that have been thought of. Alternative economists, I don't know whether any of you know Clifford Hugh Douglas, who between the wars from the 1920s created an amazing alternative system and then was just slaughtered by the economists, ridiculed, basically based on taxing economic transactions and banks. So the province of Alberta in Canada, he got them to reduce their national debt enormously. What other country or state has managed to reduce the national debt? So there are so many possibilities there. Actually, if our dear economists and related people would turn their mind more to local and to human-centric possibilities. Because the trouble is, as a belief system, we talk about religious fundamentalism. What the Rinpoche said about religions is very true, but we see the problems of Christian or Islamic or Hindu fundamentalism. But there is no fundamentalism like the fundamentalism of economics, that it is so steeped in dogma that only the elite can question, and they have their formulas and rationality that they use in pursuit of something so irrational.
Felix, can you say something also about one of the hotbeds of this whole debate is in Orissa? Can you say something about your experiences there?
One of the things that I've concentrated on is mining, because both mining industry and the arms industry, which are very related, they're both the center of corruption. Like, it's very easy to talk about corruption in India. We all know it's there. But it doesn't start from India. It starts, among other things, from the arms industry and trade, where the amount of corruption there is phenomenal. And anybody who knows about the mining industry in India knows the corruption surrounding it is phenomenal. But, in a way, the ideology of it, for example, Orissa, it's often said, it says in Oriya school textbooks, Orissa is one of the poorest states in India, but it is very rich in minerals. All we have to do is develop the minerals in the mountains which are lying unutilized up there, and we will become the richest. And it is so deeply false at every level, that argument. And was argued, if you know about the Dongria, basically Niyamgiri is a big mountain range that is capped with bauxite. So a company taking the sacred name Vedanta launched itself in London to get finance for the aluminium industry, and it already built a refinery below the mountain of Niyamgiri, thinking it could easily then force the government to give it the bauxite mines and gas. Because the Dongria Kond, who live in Niyamgiri, that special tribe, they have a taboo on cutting the forest at the top of the mountains. Their supreme deity is Niyam Raja, which means the king of law. And they understand, as in fact all of the tribals understand, that life comes from the mountains. Material life comes from the mountains because mountains are storehouses of water. So you can find on YouTube one of the Dongria leaders called Lado Sikoka saying, people say there is crores, millions of rupees worth of minerals lying on our mountain. And if we utilize it, we'll all be rich. But I say that this is a complete lie, because Niyamgiri is our mother and father. Life comes from there. And the companies coming to steal it from us are like demons, the demons of mythology. They are like demons, Asur-manu. And I think there is such knowledge coming from traditional communities like this. And of course, Helena is talking about it in the back. And we all need to bring the voices from these local.
Camilla, about Brazil, what's happening there? Can you share something?
A lot of things are happening there. And I'm very glad to be in India this time. This is my second time in India in a short period, in 2 years, because it's amazing to see the similarities of what is going on in Brazil and what's going on in India. So, for those who are familiar with the acronym BRICS, no, there is in the late years this trend that if...
And an economist or a business capitalist might be able to look at that place and say, oh, here is a business opportunity. Here is an undeveloped market. Because we could replace this trust with security guards. We could replace mutual aid with insurance. There are many things that people do for each other that they could pay for instead. So it's a form of social capital that could be stripped away and then sold back. And the same thing is happening with the iron ore, or even the health of the people in Brazil. Oh, here are some people who are eating a natural diet and using herbal medicine. Well, we could disempower that, take that away through advertising, through media, through the destruction of identity, through so-called science that tells them that the worldview that supports herbal medicine is invalid, that says that the sacred mountaintops, they're not sacred, that's superstitious nonsense. And so through many, many ways, taking this social capital and natural capital away and turning it into a product. So why are we doing this?
Because they're insane.
It's tempting to say, well, it's because of that evil capitalist. I wish it were that simple. And I'm really happy that Helena said that it's not because of some evil people somewhere. we're very comfortable as at least my culture, the dominant culture of the world, is very comfortable with conquering evil as a way to solve a problem. But really, do you guys have the game musical chairs? Where you have maybe 20 people, 19 chairs, and you're dancing around, and then the music stops. What if we played that here? And not only do you lose the game if you don't get a chair, but you don't get to eat today. And in fact, maybe your children don't get to eat, and very bad things happen to you. So everybody is playing this game of musical chairs, and the music stops, and elbowing each other out of the way, and pushing, and maybe there's some very nice people who are being generous and sacrificing their chair. But the rules of the game are set up to drive selfish behavior. And that's exactly how our financial system works. Literally, I won't go into the details, but it's because of the way, and Helena was talking about this too, the way that money is created in our system as debt bearing interest. Always more debt than there is money, an artificial scarcity. In a world that's fundamentally abundant, even to the point, as Rinpoche was saying, that we even pay for water. Nothing is more abundant on earth than water, and we've managed to make even that artificially scarce. Yeah, so I think we need to develop this systemic understanding. And that's why it's important, I think, to understand economics on its own terms in order that we can see through the logic that it's offering us. That says that when the people of Goa have insurance markets and security guards, and when the people of Brazil are buying vaccines, and when the people everywhere on earth are selling away their gift economies and their self-reliance, and even purchasing the feeling of belonging in this universe, purchasing the feeling of existing because they're so cut off from nature, from each other, then we're better off. Economics says we're better off because we have more goods and services that we're paying for. So it's an ideology, but it's also a system, and I think we have to work on it on every level. Our economic system that creates artificial scarcity, it's not quite the root. You know, you could say that all of these seemingly separate issues that Helena was talking about, you know, nuclear power here, nuclear waste, and prison system, and human trafficking, and all these things, these are maybe the branches or the fruits of this poisonous plant. And and just by chopping off the leaves and the fruits, you don't kill the root. What's the root? Well, the money system seems like it's the root, but it's not really quite the root. The root is the world view, the deep mythology of separation, that says that we are separate beings in a universe of other, that says that humanity's destiny is to transcend nature through technology. And these, to a Westerner, you know, living in my society, boy, it seems true that we're a bunch of separate competing individuals. It seems true playing a game of musical chairs, but it's not true, ultimately. It's a creation. And now, even in my country, in the West, we're beginning to wake up from that. Because that story that says that life is going to get better and better through technology, through the conversion of the world into product, it's not working so well anymore. We're seeing it coming back to make us miserable. We don't believe in it anymore. Even though the structures, the fruits, seem bigger than ever, brighter than ever, it seems that the West is more dominant than ever. Externally it is, but the core, the ideological core is hollowing out. Not even the capitalists really believe in capitalism anymore. It's just like the Soviet Union. In the 1950s, everybody, at least the elites, really believed in communism. We will bury you, said Khrushchev in the 60s. They really believed in it. By the 1980s, the state was just as powerful as ever, but even the elites didn't believe in it anymore. The core was hollowing out. And I think that that's happening today as well. And so it means that we have a really golden moment to change the mythology. And so we work on every level, the root, the stem, and the branches as well.
Isn't humanity really moving forward? The Human Development Index, all these things say we are going forward, and surely you cannot tell us we should go back to the past.
Yeah, I would like to raise a doubt about whether we've ever gone forward. This is a big issue. They say, okay, at least these industrialized, westernized countries were prosperous for some time. Now they are going down, but at least they were prosperous for some time. I go sometimes on the internet to look at inconvenient figures. Now, Helena mentioned about the depression rate in the United States. There was a recent survey done among all the workers in the United States, worldwide, actually it was worldwide, by the Manpower Group. It was just, I think, a few weeks ago. The results came on the net. And the survey establishes very clearly that they interviewed a lot of people all over the world. In the United States, they found that 75% of the people who are working are not satisfied with their jobs. Now, these are the guys who are teaching us management theory, and productivity, and efficiency. And in their own house, there are 75 fellows who are saying, 75% of fellows saying that we don't care a shit what we have to do. We would rather go out of this room and do something else. But we can't, because we have got to survive. So we are kept in this cage, doing things that we don't want to do. Now you look at the prison population. Everybody knows it is not, you don't have to go to Wikipedia. The largest incarcerated population in the world, United States. Yes. You're going in next.
In the United States, there are more prisoners than there are farmers.
You're going in next.
Who says we're not number one?
Then you take the rape cases. At that time, even we all condemned the rape case in Delhi, and I condemn it till today. And I don't like what is happening in India. When you look at the rape UN data, from 2004 to 2010, the UN data, which is underestimated data, 80,000 cases reported to the police in the United States. But the US Justice Department says that 300,000 women are raped every year in the United States. And the Center for Disease Control says the figure is actually 1.3 million. This is only in relation to a population of how much? 260 million? 300 million. 300 million. Now you take the rape cases in India for a population of 1.4 billion, and you figure out who has progressed where. This economy today is the largest arms dispenser in the world, $66.3 billion. I've just written these figures down because I'm getting old, I said, and I keep forgetting things. And they are exporting arms to 120 countries. Russia is the second highest at $4 billion. Now, what type of an economy of happiness can you have when you are spreading this amount of mayhem and destruction all over the world? Now, how can you consider that there would be any trace of happiness in an economy of this kind? This kind of people in jail, there are women being assaulted. This is not only US. There was a report that came on a UN study on Europe, which found that out of the under population of 182 million, 62 million had been sexually assaulted after the age of 15. This is UNESCO just a few months ago. Now please open your eyes. Please open your eyes. Where did these mythologies come that these were advanced civilizations? They were advanced in this type of screwing of their population. But they couldn't be advanced in any other sense of the term. Their populations are now ground to functioning as cogs in a big mega machine which itself is now terrorizing the planet. And all that we can say about this economy is, wow, we will now send our children also to join them. And we call ourselves parents. And we call ourselves concerned about the planet. So, I am one of the dissenters for very long. I said, let's not try and devalue the value of the local. We began this problem for ourselves when we thought, because Macaulay Bob had come and said, sorry, all you guys, whatever you have done is of no use whatsoever, put it in the basket. After that, for 150 years, we continued with him. After he has gone, there and gone, we still continue in practice, None of us want to obey, even think that we subscribe to what Macaulay said in theory. But in practice, we have banned every bit of the local from our lives, including ourselves. Including ourselves. We don't really feel that any of us is worth anything anymore. And that's why we have all these certification schemes, diplomas. People are now being certified till the age of 35. Because they all believe they began as zeros and they will end as zeros unless they get filled with all this sort of stuff that keeps being put into them, because they feel fundamentally that nothing about them, nothing about their locality, nothing about their language is of any use. I can't believe that there will be mothers and fathers who would want their child to speak in a language which is not their own. That's the first commitment to cultural genocide. We are still the only country in the world with a maximum number of people talking in a maximum number of tongues. Now we are trying to destroy that. But we are far ahead of it. Look at any indicator that you want, largely any indicator you want, we are far ahead. So where did this mythology came? That they were the centers of happiness, they are the centers of entertainment. Entertainment is meant for people who are bored, who don't know what to do with their lives. They have to be entertained with somebody jumping on the stage up and down. So why do you need entertainment for people who are happy? Why do you need tourism? I was discussing it here. What is the origins of tourism? The origins of tourism are basically an economy employing people for in such mind-stifling, mind-killing jobs, as Schumacher used to say, that if you don't give them leave for 3 weeks from it, they will start killing each other. So they have to go to entertainment to Manila, to Panta, what is that in Thailand, some Pattaya, and Goa to come to have fun with, say, the children on the beach. These are people who need to be really entertained, because they are living in an economy which has ruined them completely. Apologies to Helena, how she got out of it. But you have to search for human beings in Europe, and you have to search for human beings in the United States today. My brother came back recently from UK. He was living there for 5 years in a building with 16 flats. He said, Claude, for 5 years I didn't know who are the other people in the other remaining 15 flats. Neither were they bothered about who was living in the 16th flat.
Claude, can we ask other people want to comment on what this whole idea of progress, development, going back?
Too difficult, I must say.
No. Thank you. No problem. Let's,
just like Claude is saying, about, if you look at the pattern of what is called development, where it starts from, I would say the arms industry has been the center of it for at least much over 2,000 years. That if you look back to the Greeks and the Romans, the technology they became really brilliant for was the siege engines and armour and from there till now, I mean now every year, the money spent on new kinds of guns, missiles, defence systems, and so on, unbelievable. So our computers, our laptops, all of our technology, it is coming basically from there. And in the important ways, I would say there has been no real development for over 2,000 years in terms of, our economics departments, our political science departments. Why aren't they looking at, let's create a system where the resources of the earth are shared fairly, proper economics. Let's do that. Why aren't economics students trained to do that? Let's create a power structure where power does not corrupt, where there's a system of checks in places, so people who are drawn to become politicians are not going to be people who abuse power.
But Felix, people would say that don't you want development to happen on Orissa? What's going on with this, man? What's going to happen to all? There's starvation, there's poverty. What's going on there? Don't you want anything to happen there?
Yeah, I mean, people say this all the time, and of course, everybody wants development in the sense of the basic needs of life for everybody. But what is happening with the development model that's been pushed very hard in Orissa and other poor parts of India, actually in practice, the poor people have got much, much, much poorer. And especially I mean, even though the Economist and the World Bank itself have slightly tweaked the goalposts to make it look as if poverty is diminishing, we all know, if we are linked with the grassroots, that it is very much not. And in terms of, I wanted to add what you were saying about leisure and entertainment. If you look at the Adivasi cultures, as they still are, but certainly were a few years ago, I mean, they're the most highly developed in terms of these leisure activities, that every person there is a dancer, that the passion, the incredible intricate knowledge of dances and song and everything, they don't need stars, they don't need people to entertain them, ever.
Some people say you're being very romantic.
You are just trying to provoke us.
Yeah.
That's my job, yeah.
That's my job. But it is, okay, unromantic. I mean, if you look at...
My career as a supermodel is kind of over, so now I only have to be provoking. That's all I can do here.
One of the other areas where tribal life is very, very highly developed is in the art of romance. That if you, I mean, look at the old books, they are such songs, improvisation on love songs, love affairs, love gifts. I mean, with a lot of restraint, but a lot of passion. And so when people say, this is ecological romanticism, there is nothing, people are just backward, you are romanticizing them. Actually, they are very romantic cultures, or they were, and very, very sophisticatedly romantic cultures. But in terms of romanticizing them, no. I mean, life there is hard. Every culture has shadow sides, but underdeveloped. No, they're not underdeveloped. That is one thing they're not. And on the term underdevelopment and how that was pushed when President Truman became president in, I think, 1949, he sold the world underdevelopment. And as Esteve said, then immediately 2/3 of the world we became defined as underdeveloped, trying to escape from this thing called underdevelopment. And then the Marxists took that over, and I mean, just to finish, an Indian ethnomusicologist was living in Germany. He made a beautiful recording of studying ethnomusic in Germany. And he kept repeating, he had little snatches of a beer cellar song of people doing yoga and the sound of jet aeroplanes going overhead. And he kept saying, the people here are suffering very, very much from overdevelopment. And, I think we are all in a sense, I mean, you could say the same about Bangalore or many of us, that...
Can I ask this also about Helena, because you've written a lot about Ladakh, and do you want development in Ladakh, or what's the deal?
I'm certainly an expert on being accused of romanticizing. I've had a lot of accusations of that for almost 40 years now. And I do hope people would look at the book Ancient Futures, because in the book I normally don't get that accusation. And I try there to distinguish between There are these different levels that we need to look at. One of them is that if people have decided, having seen modernity, that they would like to have glass in their windows, they would like to have more heating in the winter, and maybe a better system of cooling, maybe they would like to be more connected with some more modern forms of communication. That is a completely separate issue. What we're getting today in the name of development is mass urbanization and mass crises. I mean, now the other question of whether, people around the world actually would prefer some of these comforts and some of these improvements, if you like, that is a completely different question, and that's one that needs to be discussed. It is very, very clear that in terms of allocating natural resources, in terms of making use, particularly of renewable energy, we do not need to destroy life on Earth in order to make some changes to traditional situations. So it's not for me. I've never been someone who's been telling the Ladakhis, you should live like this, you should stay like this. My work has always been to provide information about the reality of the system that has been sold to them as hugely successful and only bringing benefits, and the stark reality, some of which Claude was spelling out. That's what our information has been about. So I think we all owe it to ourselves, to our own children, right here in Bangalore, in Sweden, in Ladakh. It really doesn't matter anymore if we're very traditional or very modern. We all need to wake up to the fact that the current economic system is a rapidly moving machine that is robbing all of us, really, of a future. So must not get caught up in these discussions about tradition and development, and that would, completely cloud over an understanding of what we're really talking about.
Actually, we have a debate, ongoing debate in Latin America about alternatives to development. This has been growing, especially with the progressive governments that have been elected in the Andean region of Latin America in the past decade. And one common agreement of this public debate, of course it's very restricted yet, it's not a massive debate, but we have a lot of indigenous intellectuals and people that are leaders of movements that are putting forward this very clear thinking that progress itself, this idea of progress, it's a heritage from the 19th century epistemology that opened the timeline and sent us to this eternal future where there's always something that we have to move forward in order to perfect ourselves. But this and the European intellectual history of the 19th century cannot be separated of its colonial history and what was happening elsewhere. In the same way, when the term development was presented in 1949 by President Truman, it was the synonymous for the U.S. hegemony, the post-World War II. One very clear proof of this is that the World Bank, one of the Bretton Woods institutions, was created to reconstruct Europe and develop. So then, right away, especially in Latin America, we started with this underdevelopment school and to debate this concept that became more like this dispositive that imprisons our minds, and what worries me most has as hostage our political discourse. Because we cannot speak, and there are no political parties that dare to say that they are against development. When development got in crisis in the late 60s, and that was this open of the limits to growth, and the first UN summit on environment that in Stockholm in '72, they started a process to add in '87 sustainable development, to give a new name for it, because just development was not working very good. Well, of course, the process went worse and worse and worse. And more recently, we had this new shape of the same content that now presents itself as the green economy. So currently, everything you hear about low carbon economy, low carbon growth, just place carbon around, you know, because I hope this we can address in the workshop in the afternoon. But how climate change has a major content of a vested trade agenda, of what is being negotiated currently to set up a global agreement at the end of 2015. It's massively about trade and nothing to do about climate. But back to the green economy. So now we are facing with this green economy and the governments of the South putting forward, you know, in agreement with the North, this new vision for economy. This is something I also think we would need to discuss in here. That is not only the movement that are thinking of economics of happiness, and that there is something structurally wrong, and that we need to come out together with something. The system, the elephant, or I must say the green elephant, you know, has figured it out at the same way that people are very discontent and they are feeling that something is intrinsically wrong, and they have shaped a narrative that is very, very compelling. And just to give you one anecdotal example, when we criticize what is being proposed, and Brazil is the laboratory for the green economy and all its mechanisms, they say, oh, but how do you say that? Because it's Indian, it's a guy from India, this economist, this brilliant economist from India that has worked with microcredit that is proposing it. So I don't know if you're familiar with Pavan Sukhdev, but Pavan Sukhdev is a frequent flyer to Brazil, where he meets with all our corporations, where he is teaching all of our GMO industry and our steel industry. Now we have green iron. We have, of course, responsible, sustainable green GMO soy. We have this responsible cattle, of course, to slaughter and to export. But all of this packaged into this new bright green future of the natural capital, and how to commodify it to the last straw, all the package of environmental services. But of course, it's very hard for us to criticize, because after all, it is coming from India. So we need your support, because this is just one cherry on this whole development prison that we are all caged within, and that we have to face it as it was an invention. It was a concept invented, inserted, and repeated to make us. Sorry. I think it's the air conditioner here. But anyhow, there is a lot of thinking going on in Latin America about how those governments that try to do something different, how they can talk in terms of electoral discourse, about public discourse, alternatives to development. Because nowadays is a political suicide. You say in public that you are against development and that are criticizing development. And this is the most fundamental issue that we need to bring forward.
When you actually take away the wrappings, what is development really about? It is about the conversion of life into money. Fundamentally, that is what it's about. What is progress? Roughly the same thing, with the added dimension that you have technological razzmatazz. You have technology to impress an already suffering species. There's something much more powerful than humanity on Earth. The two things which I think are important to understand is the themes related to what Charles was saying earlier, which is the separation from nature and the separation from each other. And I want to share with you two short stories from personal experience, or at least from friends close to me, to illustrate what I mean. A friend of mine who's an anthropologist, an American, takes his 8-year-old son to France. And they are staying on a friend's farm, and in the morning he hears these shrieks. So it's cattle being killed in order to yield beef. And this 8-year-old child, he completely freaks out. He goes crazy. He's non-vegetarian. But he goes completely crazy because till that point he had thought that cattle yields beef the way it yields milk. So that's what happens when you've only encountered beef in the supermarket, when you don't have a sense of the connection between nature and culture and so on. And the alienation within human cultures, I'll give you an example of, this is something which happened to a friend of mine. So this is an Indian friend who first goes to the US 25 years ago, and one night her roommate knocks on her door and she asks the following question: "Can I borrow an onion from you?" So my friend asks her to repeat the question. And she says, "Can I borrow an onion from you?" Now, the concept of borrowing an onion does not exist in our culture for reasons that shouldn't need to be explained. If a culture has reached the point where this question becomes a reasonable question to ask, then there has been massive cultural, social devastation preceding that. And that is what one needs to talk about in India today, when everybody's being drugged with the idea of development. We need to ask ourselves a very simple question. Do we want our children to grow up in an economy or in a society, in a human community? And at this point of time, I believe there is a choice. All of us are being invited to live in an economy and are being invited to take our positions in the global market economy. And there's a pecking order, there's a hierarchy, there's a race which has been unleashed. You're supposed to be a winner in that race, and only if you win will everybody love you, otherwise you are nobody, etc. So the winner becomes conservative because they have to keep their winning spot, and the loser becomes conservative in a different sense because they have to chase the winners. Otherwise, their identity, their relationships, their sense of community, everything is destroyed. Now, yesterday I was sharing with some friends a little metaphor of how...
What do you mean conservative?
You fundamentally do not want to change. You want to become like them. So, there used to be an ad, a commercial on American television many years ago when Michael Jordan used to play basketball. And the ad was a Nike ad, and it said, "I'd like to be like Mike." Right? You don't want to be yourself, you don't want to even vaguely resemble yourself. Right? You want to become like someone out there who's Sachin or who's Mike or who's Tiger or who's somebody. Somebody who's won a race. Right? So we've all been indoctrinated into a wannabe world, right? Now, what I'm trying to get at is that in order to sell Facebook, in order to sell that product to you, they need to destroy the real thing. If they cannot destroy the real thing, there is no market for Facebook. Something which is complete fiction. Facebook is pure fiction. It's objectified human illusions calling itself a society, right? It's a network pretending to be a community. How does it sell itself? It can only sell itself if you've first broken the community, you've created alienated, atomized individuals who then are desperate to reconnect. Notice the number of times we use that verb these days, connect. Why do we need to? I mean, if you're already a part of nature, already a part of human society and community, the concept of getting connected should not exist. It's an assumption. That's how many of us grew up in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So the idea of connection emerges when you've already broken down society. And if you've got an economy which is a predatory economy, fundamentally an invasive economy, a war-based economy, which makes money when it destroys, and it makes money when it restores. It can never create anything. This whole business about value addition and creation of wealth is pure fiction. You've destroyed something real, and you're trying to replace it with something artificial. And you have a scarcity of everything. And that's how you make money. So that's my point, basically, that development is basically about the destruction of society in order to create an artificial economy.
It's great. We're 1,000 people in this room. Yeah, but do we really have a chance? Like McDonald's and Coca-Cola and their billion-dollar budgets.
Don't forget David and Goliath, buddy.
Yeah. Rationally, it's very hard to make a persuasive case that we have a chance. And anytime I'm feeling optimistic, sometimes I'll take a little dose of doom and gloom. There's plenty of websites for that. And the problems do seem very overwhelming. But I think that all of us have had experiences that give us a glimpse of what is possible in the world. I was very moved when I first encountered Helena's work, describing the society that was there, that seemed, the title of the book, Ancient Futures, it says this isn't just this thing that we have to preserve, and isn't it terrible that it's disappearing and we have to preserve it at all costs, but it's also telling us something important about how the world could be. And I think that we all carry some kind of knowledge that the world is supposed to be and can be much more beautiful and authentic and connected and intimate than what we've been offered as normal. And also that we know that it's possible to get there, and we know that this possibility isn't some theoretical, maybe it could happen if enough people get it, but that we ourselves, each one of us, have agency in making this happen. And this is contrary to our rational understanding of how to make something happen in the world. Like, Carlo now is part of a movement with 9 million people in India, in Italy, or maybe even more. And it wasn't, and it only started maybe 6-7 years ago, and it wasn't that those 2 or 3 or that small room full of people said, okay, we've got a plan. Here's our goal, 9 million people and representation in Parliament, and so we're gonna, in year 1, we're gonna achieve this step, and then year 2, this step, and we're gonna have, how much money is that gonna take? We're gonna raise funds, and we're gonna have a big plan. That's not how it happened, is it? No, it's something that emerged organically. You knew that something was possible. You knew that there was a there, and we've all caught the glimpse of a there that stirs our hearts. But you didn't know how to get from point A to point B. So how do you make something happen that you don't know how to make happen? The only way is to be in service to that which wants to be born. And to offer your gifts toward this thing that wants to be born. So yeah, people ask me like, what should I do? I don't know. I mean, I know some things to do, and I'm not saying that the things that we know how to do we shouldn't do. But as far as a sense of optimism, if someone says, well, prove that it's possible, Charles, I can't do that. Yet I know that it's possible. I'll say one more thing about that. I often also get accused of romanticizing the past, or of naivete, of being naive. And I think that both of those accusations are coming from the same place. It's a place of pain and grief. Because this knowledge that the world is supposed to be more beautiful, every child is born with that. Every child is born knowing that you're not supposed to hate Monday. Something like 75% of all people in my country hate their job. We're born with the knowledge that our environment isn't supposed to be full of ugly things, cheap, ugly things. You know, we know that. But that knowledge gets, and we also know that we are, that each one of us has a magnificent gift to give towards something beautiful and meaningful. Like we know this, and this knowledge is suppressed and betrayed again and again, and it's very painful. And then when something reawakens that knowledge, like the film Ancient Futures, you know, like these glimpses of what's possible, where somebody's saying, yeah, we could do this, then that wound is awakened, and it's afraid that it's going to get betrayed again. So we retreat into cynicism. And the cynic thinks that he's being realistic. But actually, the cynic doesn't do anything. It's the naive person who follows this sense of a possibility, even if you don't know every step of the way there. It's the naive person who tries the impossible and then discovers that it isn't impossible after all.
Well, I've never thought that was a question that one should ask. Because if you don't have a chance, then you might as well all come to Goa and hang out on the beach. And not meet here in an institution like this. As a matter of fact, most of my friends in the mining world and in the real estate world and in the hotel industry and all have been wanting to get me into a lunatic asylum locked up long time back. But today I am here in a lunatic asylum in a Niemann's Institute. And I feel so happy. There are a whole lot of other lunatics who think that they can take on this global enterprise. This is a paper tiger. This is a paper tiger. Mao Zedong always told us, look on these things as paper tigers. If you look at the American experience over the last 40 to 50 years, and the amount of weaponry, invasions, wars, etc. that America has launched, you'll be surprised to know that there are only one war so far, and that is against this Bermuda, or what is this one? Grenada. Grenada. Sri Lankans will beat them to a pulp. They got kicked out of Vietnam. They've recently been kicked out of Iraq. Afghanistan, they are going to be kicked out. And so what would you learn from this? That if you look at the amount of trillions of dollars which they have printed and put into arms purchase and gone around, you would think that they should be ruling not just the earth but the bloody cosmos. Think of the weaponry. Think of the amount of atomic bombs that they have and which are not dismantled. They should really be ruling everybody, even the insects of the world.
They think they are.
Maybe they think, but I'm saying, so why would you think that they are powerful?
We're in a terrible, terrible situation where we're allowing this elephant to become bigger, and the flows of capital back and forth are destroying the quality of life everywhere. Yes, there are some people who are very wealthy and are doing okay in Sydney and in Vancouver and in some of these other cities, but the writing is on the wall. The mobility of foreign investment, the instability, and the skyrocketing house prices, wherever there are jobs to be had, that's where the house prices naturally go up, and millions of people flock in. It's unsustainable, and it is not very livable or very desirable.